What secrets lie beneath the opulent facade of white plantation mistresses? Are we genuinely prepared to embark on an astonishing voyage into the intricate tapestry of their hidden lives, where clandestine affairs and forbidden desires have been disguised by the passage of time? Join us as we fearlessly explore the depths of history, revealing long-buried mysteries and challenging dominant narratives. With each discovery, we are confronted with the intricacies of human nature, as well as the long-term consequences of historical silence. Prepare to be captivated, agitated, and completely engrossed as we unravel the mysteries of these mysterious people, shining light on a world rarely explored. I have never found a bright-looking colored man whose confidences I have won, who has not told me of instances where he has been compelled, either by his mistress or by white women of the same class, to have a connection with them. Captain Richard J. Hinton. Behind the exterior appearance of luxury and propriety, bedrooms on southern plantations conceal a hidden world of complex, intimate affairs, particularly those of white plantation mistresses. The white plantation mistresses, typically portrayed as images of grace and poise, navigated a maze of personal desires, cultural expectations, and unspoken norms within the confines of their bedrooms. Marriage's sacredness was a public issue, but it often took on a different face in private. Many mistresses found themselves in loveless marriages engineered for economic or social gain. Within these limits, some people sought refuge in secret partnerships. These relationships, which ranged from ephemeral romances to long-term attachments, were kept private for fear of societal retaliation and personal embarrassment. However, not all partnerships were founded out of emotional holes. Some mistresses engaged in affairs as a form of rebellion against rigorous cultural rules or in search of personal satisfaction. These liaisons, although giving a momentary respite, also presented risks. The balance between personal desire and cultural expectations was tricky. A scandal could destroy a woman's reputation, condemning her to social isolation. In a society where women had little agency, these private activities provided a measure of control and autonomy, albeit in a restricted and frequently perilous capacity. The relationships became much more convoluted when race and class intersected. Relationships between mistresses and men from lower social classes or different races were considerably more dangerous and complicated. Furthermore, these women's bedrooms weren't just for romantic or physical meetings. They were also places of emotional upheaval, strategic plotting, and, on sometimes, cultivating forbidden love. Whether it was a secret moment with a lover or a night spent alone in contemplation, these rooms experienced the multiple parts of their lives. Let us consider how race and class influenced intimate encounters. Race and class were two pillars that had a significant impact on the private interactions of white plantation mistresses in the antebellum South. These forces not only influenced society standards, but also molded intimate interactions in ways that were frequently hidden from public view. In a society where racial hierarchy was strictly enforced, cross-race relationships were fraught with stigma and peril. Encounters between white mistresses and men of color, either enslaved or free, were uncommon, and, if discovered, resulted in harsh consequences. These ties threatened the basic foundation of a society based on racial supremacy, and were thus veiled in even greater secrecy. Class also played a significant effect. The antebellum South had a society that was very mindful of its social standing. Intimate interactions across class lines, such as those between a plantation mistress and a lower-class white man, were deemed scandalous. These liaisons were viewed as a violation of the unspoken social contract, in which marriages and partnerships were used to maintain or improve one's social rank. Interestingly, The confluence of race and class was also reflected in the relationships between mistresses and their slaves. While some stories romanticize these interactions, the truth was often far different. Most of these unions were not consensual, and they exemplified the power inequalities and exploitation inherent in slavery. Children born from these unions frequently lived in a liminal environment, neither belonging to their mother's worlds nor entirely recognized by society as a whole. Moreover, the societal norms regarding race and class impacted the emotional and psychological aspects of these relationships. Guilt, fear, and societal judgment often weighed heavily on the mistresses, influencing their decisions and shaping their experiences in these intimate encounters. The economics of love and lust. The intimate lives of white plantation mistresses were inextricably linked to society conventions as well as prevailing economics. The intricate dance of love, lust, and economics shaped these women's actions, relationships, and, eventually, their futures. Marriages among the plantation elite were frequently deals intended to consolidate income, property, and influence. For a plantation mistress, marriage was about economic strategy rather than passionate love. These relationships guaranteed the financial and social stability of the families involved. In this framework, love and lust were secondary considerations that were frequently sought outside of the married relationship. Some mistresses found emotional or physical fulfillment in extramarital affairs. However, these liaisons were not without economic implications. An affair with a wealthy or important guy may bring additional security or benefits, albeit at a high risk. Relationships with men of inferior social and economic standing, on the other hand, were fraught with danger, providing nothing more than personal enjoyment and potentially risking the mistress's financial stability. The economic factor also influenced interactions between mistresses and enslaved people. These relationships were profoundly based in the power disparities inherent in the slave system. For the mistresses, these relationships were a complicated interplay of power dynamics involving economy, race, and personal ambitions. Furthermore, the economic ramifications of a scandal may be significant. A mistress caught up in an affair jeopardized not just her own reputation, but also her family's financial stability. In extreme situations, this could result in a loss of social standing, financial catastrophe, or even legal consequences. Methods for health, hygiene, and birth control. Health, hygiene, and birth control were all important but underappreciated parts of white plantation mistresses' private life in the antebellum South. Understanding and practices surrounding these themes differed greatly from today's norms, reflecting medical knowledge and society views at the time. Health and hygiene in romantic relationships were basic. There was little awareness about reproductive health, and discussions about it were frequently frowned upon. Plantation mistresses had to rely on folk remedies and minimal medical help. Hygiene practices were poor, limited by a lack of modern facilities and knowledge of microorganisms and illnesses. Given cultural expectations of marital fidelity and procreation, birth control methods were crude and secretive. Rudimental barrier measures, herbal mixtures, and withdrawal were all used as contraceptives. These approaches were inconsistent and poorly understood, frequently passed down through whispered advice rather than formal medical consultation. For plantation mistresses, fertility management was a challenging matter. Unwanted pregnancies, particularly from extramarital affairs, jeopardized their social standing and personal safety. Fear of pregnancy as a result of an affair may drive people to take drastic steps, such as using risky techniques to end pregnancies. Unspoken rules of engagement. The lives of white plantation mistresses were governed by a set of unstated norms of interaction, particularly in their intimate relationships. These profoundly ingrained societal conventions governed not just who they could associate with, but also how they behaved inside these interactions. Discretion was key. In a society that valued honor and reputation above all else, the slightest suspicion of misconduct might have fatal consequences. Mistresses who had extramarital affairs were required to maintain strict secrecy. The necessity for caution frequently resulted in clandestine encounters and coded messages, with each move taken to keep the affair secret from public view. Another implicit obligation was to maintain the family's social position. Marriages were frequently more about alliances and financial gain than love, and mistresses were expected to support these relationships for the benefit of their families. Any romantic or sexual relationships outside of marriage had to be conducted in such a way that they did not endanger the family's social standing. The societal expectations extended to the choice of mates. Relationships with someone from a lower social class or a different race were not only frowned upon, but might be hazardous. These liaisons were deemed a significant violation of the social order and were subject to the heaviest punishment. Furthermore, there were expectations for the emotional components of these interactions. While physical affairs may be quietly allowed, emotional ties were viewed as more dangerous, as they could cause more deep disruptions to the social fabric. For the mistresses, navigating these unsaid standards required a delicate balancing act. They had to balance their own goals with the risk of social ruin, which often resulted in a life of internal struggle and emotional turmoil. These laws were not simply a matter of personal preference. They were enforced by the community, with the danger of social ostracism acting as a powerful deterrent. The unknown stories of children born from these relationships. Children born from white plantation mistresses' illegal romances reflect a tragic and largely neglected period in history. These children, born amid secret and scandal, led difficult and ambiguous lives. Children born from white community activities had to strike a difficult balance between secrecy and normalcy. If their paternity remained concealed, they may be nurtured as legitimate children while remaining aware of whispered facts and the possibility of discovery. The mistresses saw the birth of such a child as a perpetual reminder of their violation, a living secret that needed to be kept hidden in order to preserve the family's honor and status. More difficult were the accounts of children born from plantation mistresses and enslaved males. These children epitomized the harsh paradoxes of their day, having been born into a culture that venerated racial purity while yet being the product of its violation. Their sheer presence was frequently a taboo matter, and their lives were characterized by a lack of recognition and a struggle for identification. The fates of these children differed greatly. Some were raised in secret by their mothers, while others were sent away or even assimilated into the slave population. Their social standing, opportunities, and treatment were primarily determined by their physical appearance and birth circumstances, fashion and beauty standards. Fashion and beauty standards were not just markers of personal taste, but also important emblems of prestige, morality, and femininity for white plantation mistresses to follow. These standards were critical to maintaining their social standing and public image, and they had a subtle but considerable impact on their intimate lives. Fashion during the antebellum period was distinguished by its grandeur and rigorous devotion to trends. Gowns with tight waists, voluminous skirts, and elaborate embellishments were common, expressing society's expectation that women exemplify grace and refinement. These outfits were more than just fashion statements. They were also social status indicators. Beauty standards at the time also stressed modest and delicate features, which were often attained by using cosmetics discreetly to maintain the illusion of natural beauty. Pale complexion was regarded as a symbol of gentility, Thus, many ladies avoided sun exposure and used face powders to acquire the ideal appearance. Curls and updos symbolized femininity and sophistication in the ornate hairstyles. These fashion and beauty standards were particularly important in romantic and personal relationships. They provided a mechanism for mistresses to attract attention and show their desirability, while adhering to cultural conventions. Dressing beautifully and maintaining a certain level of attractiveness was a method to navigate the complicated social dynamics of courting and marriage. Power dynamics in the shadows. In the subterranean corridors of plantations, power dynamics shaped white plantation mistresses' private lives. While these women had a certain social standing, their personal lives were frequently fraught with power conflicts and compromises. The societal order was rigorously organized. Plantation mistresses, while important in their social circles, were primarily submissive to their husbands. This dynamic carried into their personal life, where married relationships were frequently more about duty than passion. However, in their hidden affairs, these women occasionally discovered a way to wield a different type of power. Whether it was with a plantation overseer, a visiting gentleman, or someone from a lower social class, these connections permitted them to step outside of their traditional positions. Interestingly, these encounters were not solely about physical attraction. They were likewise concerned with control and agency in a world that offered nothing. For once, they could choose their partners, choose the conditions of their interactions, and feel empowered. However, this power was a two-edged sword. If discovered, the repercussions might be severe, ranging from social isolation to personal bankruptcy. As a result, these relationships were negotiated with a mix of confidence and caution. These dynamics also influenced the interactions between mistresses and enslaved people. While some tales describe consensual partnerships, the underlying power imbalance and lack of agency for enslaved people made these meetings highly difficult and contentious. These relationships were frequently complicated webs of dominance, exploitation, and, in rare cases, true affection. Love letters with secret messages. In the white plantations, where white plantation mistresses' private lives were constantly watched, love letters and hidden communications were critical to their illicit affairs. These covert correspondences were more than just means of communication. They were lifelines of emotional expression and connection in a world where such liberties were constrained. During this time, writing a love letter was an art form, complete with coded language and hidden meanings that allowed mistresses to express forbidden wants and sentiments. These letters were frequently lovely, combining passionate sentiments with commonplace facts to hide the true depth of their emotions from prying eyes. The thrill of receiving a secret letter heightened the excitement and danger of these relationships, increasing their romantic intensity. The delivery of these letters and messages necessitated careful organization. They were delivered through trustworthy servants, hidden in secret compartments, or quietly handed over during social functions. The risk of discovery was considerable, and even a single intercepted letter could cause controversy and disaster. As a result, every word written held weight and risk. Beyond their functional utility, these secret correspondences provided a rare opportunity for self-expression. In a society where women's duties were limited and their voices were frequently stifled, these letters gave mistresses a platform to express their views, desires, and identities. They served as avenues for creativity, enthusiasm, and, on occasion, subtly rebellious behavior against the limits of their social duties. Romanticized rebellion or harsh reality. The intimate lives of white plantation mistresses often oscillate between the narratives of romanticized rebellion and harsh reality. On one hand, Popular culture has sometimes portrayed these affairs as acts of passionate defiance against the rigid societal norms. On the other, the stark reality was often far more complex and less idyllic. These romanticized portrayals typically depict plantation mistresses engaging in affairs as a form of rebellion against loveless, arranged marriages. In these narratives, these liaisons are seen as courageous acts of self-expression and pursuit of true love in a society that stifled personal desires. However, while there were undoubtedly instances where emotional fulfillment was the driving force, many of these relationships were far less about romance and more about practicality and survival. The harsh reality for many of these women was that they were bound by strings and social rules that dictated their every move, including their romantic and sexual lives. Loveless marriages were common, often arranged for economic or social gain rather than personal happiness. In this context, affairs could offer an escape, a semblance of control in a life otherwise dictated by others. Yet, this was not without risk. The consequences of being caught in an affair could be devastating, leading to social ostracism, financial ruin, and even violence. Furthermore, the idea of rebellion assumes a level of agency that many of these women did not possess. In a society where women's roles were severely restricted, acts of rebellion were not only dangerous, but often impossible. The romanticized view also overlooks the fact that some of these relationships were not consensual, especially those involving enslaved individuals, where the power dynamics made consent dubious at best. Gossip, scandal, and reputation. Gossip, scandal, and reputation were potent forces that shaped and, at times, destroyed the lives of white plantation mistresses. The social fabric of this age was tightly knit with standards and expectations, and deviating from these bounds often resulted in harsh and unforgiving criticism. Gossip served as a social currency, allowing people to exchange information that could either improve or harm their reputations. Plantation mistresses faced severe criticism from their peers. A murmur of impropriety or a whiff of scandal spread like wildfire, permanently damaging a woman's reputation. Gossip was more than simply idle banter. It was a mechanism for reinforcing social standards and punishing those who deviated from them. Scandals, particularly those involving adultery or illicit relationships, were extremely destructive. The societal standards of the period put a high priority on a woman's virtue and fidelity. A mistress involved in a scandal faced not only personal humiliation, but also the criticism of her social group. The ramifications went beyond the individual, affecting her family's status, her children's chances, and her husband's job. Reputation was everything. It was the lens through which a woman's worth and character were assessed. Maintaining a clean reputation was critical for a plantation mistress since it affected every area of her life. The fear of losing this reputation served as a strong deterrent, influencing behavior and decisions. The impact of rumor and scandal exposed the era's gender inequities. While males frequently suffered fewer consequences for their misbehavior, women bore the brunt of societal scrutiny. This double standard was a striking reminder of women's restricted agency in their lives. The psychological impact. White plantation mistresses' intricate and hidden lifestyles had a deep and multifaceted psychological influence. Living inside the rigid limitations of societal standards while maintaining covert emotional and romantic lives had a heavy emotional toll on these women. The constant worry of discovery, along with the potential of scandal and social ruin, was a constant source of stress. The anxiety of keeping appearances, concealing secrets, and managing illicit relationships may result in chronic stress and psychological strain. This continual monitoring and duplicity may emerge as worry, despair, or emotional weariness. Furthermore, The emotional tensions resulting from these events were complex. The exhilaration of a passionate relationship was frequently tempered by feelings of guilt, particularly in a society that placed a high moral value on marital fidelity. The internal conflict between society obligation and personal desire resulted in emotional stress and moral ambiguity. The psychological impact was amplified for those in relationships that spanned racial or class lines. These liaisons were not only socially unacceptable, they were frequently illegal and morally condemned. The anxiety and guilt connected with these interactions were exacerbated by the societal connotations and prospective consequences. Comparative analysis of European aristocracy. When investigating the intimate lives of white plantation mistresses, a comparison with the European aristocracy uncovers fascinating parallels and differences. Both societies had rigorous class structures and societal expectations, but the cultural and historical backgrounds resulted in diverse representations of these rules in their personal lives. In terms of marriage and relationships, Southern plantation mistresses and European aristocracy frequently formed alliances for strategic purposes. Marriages were often arranged to concentrate riches, form connections, or raise social status. However, in European nobility, extramarital romances were frequently accepted as an unspoken element of the social structure. The European elite occasionally engaged in these liaisons with a degree of openness that was uncommon in the American South. Women's roles in both communities were equally circumscribed, with expectations that they protect family honor and contribute to their family's social and political progress. However, European aristocratic women frequently had greater access to education and intellectual interests, allowing them to wield more power in their social circles. In terms of race and class, there were different racial dynamics, with slavery serving as a fundamental institution in society. Cross-racial relationships were more stigmatized and legally limited. In contrast, European aristocracies were more preoccupied with class inequalities, while racial prejudices were undoubtedly there. Forbidden love. Legal implications. Forbidden love, especially among white plantation mistresses, had both social and legal consequences. In a culture ruled by rigid moral rules and legal legislation, these illicit partnerships were not only embarrassing, but also potentially illegal. One of the most legally difficult forms of forbidden love was interracial unions. Anti-miscegenation legislation was common throughout the South. Marriage and, in many cases, all forms of intimate relationships between people of different races are prohibited. For a plantation mistress, being in a love relationship with an African American, free or enslaved, was not only socially unacceptable, but also a legal infraction. The discovery of such a relationship might result in legal punishment, social ostracism, and, in certain cases, serious consequences for the African American involved. Furthermore, the legal status of marriage in the made women susceptible. Married women had limited legal rights under coverture laws, as their identity and property were absorbed under their husbands. Mistresses' lack of legal autonomy rendered them especially prone to illicit affairs. If discovered, they had no legal recourse and could face serious penalties as financial loss, child custody, and social status. The lasting impact on modern society. The private lives of white plantation mistresses have left an indelible mark on modern culture, affecting current views on race, gender, and class. These historical narratives help to explain how previous social institutions and conventions continue to influence current views and interactions. One notable influence is the ongoing discussion about race and racial relations in America. The complicated connections between plantation mistresses and people of different races, especially those who were enslaved, demonstrate the deeply ingrained racial hierarchies that have persisted in American history. These historical perspectives help to comprehend the legacy of slavery and its ongoing impact on racial relations in the United States. The stories of these plantation mistresses offer insight into the evolution of women's roles and rights. Their experiences illustrate women's restricted agency in the past, while also highlighting advancements in women's autonomy and gender equality. Understanding their struggles and restrictions provides historical context for current efforts to establish gender equality in modern society. Furthermore, the class dynamics and emphasis on social position and wealth are consistent with contemporary debates of class and social mobility. The historical lens of plantation culture serves as a backdrop for investigating how class structures and economic status influence personal interactions and societal duties in the present. Thanks for sticking with this video till the very end. If you enjoyed this video and wish to see more of such videos, please subscribe to this channel. Also, remember to like and share this video next time. Thanks for watching.